And it just is amazing me that there's not even close to a consensus. Whether you're talking about the first 5 picks, the first 10 picks, the 20 picks. Birds fans, we appreciate you streaming on in here on Birds 365 with John McMullen and Jody McDonald. Got a couple of good guests coming your way over the next couple of hours. J-Mac, since you didn't show up at my house with no one else around, I left the dog by herself for 5 hours, and I went over to the local off-track wagering spot.
Oh.
Dropped a couple of bucks at Keeneland and Aqueduct and the like. But I hadn't gotten out and played for 3 or 4 straight hours in a row for a while, but it was fun. But yeah, should have waited for you to show up with beers.
Yeah, I was there. Me and the dog had a couple.
You did. Yeah, you honked a couple of times, and you saw Moxie at the window.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm sorry about that. My apologies.
That's why she made it for the 5 hours. I let her out. She did her business.
Saw your smiling face, and she figured she was okay. All right, that's good to know.
Obvious dog lover, so.
You and I both, and a nice little morning to get the dog out. A little chill in the air, but it's going to warm up today. It was in the 80s yesterday. So luckily spring is here. We're doing that countdown thing, spring, summer, first game of the regular season, now 149 days. But the most important countdown is the days to the draft. 13 to go. Next Thursday night will be round number 1, day number 1. And, John, I did spend some time on a couple of my favorite football sites yesterday, and it just continues to amaze me. You've been doing this a long time. I've been doing it slightly longer. Both of us have logged many a lead up to draft years. I do not remember the actual prognostications, and now there are more than ever before. Shoot, I go back when Mel Kiper's draft guide, my buddy Dave T. Thomas's draft guide, there were 4 or 5 of them. Our lad's draft guide.
Yeah.
That's
still going, by the way. Our lads, Mel's. Yeah, I don't know if Mel still does his guide. If he does, I haven't seen it, but I used to have all those. I used to love Mel's guide.
Right, but when you had all those, you had all 5 of them.
Yeah.
Now there's 2,000 of them, and you've got to be on top of each and every single one of them. And it just is amazing me that there's not even close to a consensus. Whether you're talking about the first 5 picks, the first 10 picks, the 20 picks, our guy, Kyle Hamilton, is going anywhere from number 4 to number 21 or 22. That just doesn't happen, John. All right, you're off by a couple of spots here, there. One team likes a player more than another. But usually there's a pretty good grasp of where the players rank, how they should be looked at, where they're probably going to come off the board. Man, there are derivations out there this year.
Yeah, and I think it starts with, I think Kyle's the hot button player because of, if he doesn't run poorly, it's not even a question. He's a top 5 pick at worst, top 10. Maybe because of the position, but unfortunately he didn't run well. More at his pro day than the combine. I think it was fine. At the combine wasn't great, but I think it was a 4.59. And if you look at Justin Simmons, who we brought up earlier this week, I think he ran a 4.61. He's arguably the best safety in football right now. So it's not a death sentence that you can't play. If you run a 4.59 at safety, and you and I have been above board, and it's been pretty consistent. And I think that's what we don't know. It's like, well, what do NFL teams think? We don't have all the information that they have, so we get, I think, a little bit too hung up on measurables, particularly, combine numbers and pro day numbers, which are just all over the place. If you're at Penn State, you're going to run a 4.4. If you got the right scout with the quick trigger, you're going to run a 4.6. I mean, from teams' perspective, they get those real numbers from people they trust and blah, 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 and all that stuff. But I do think it's overrated overall. From every coach I've talked to over the years, No doubt about it. You have to reach a certain level of athleticism to be able to play professional football, and each position needs some different things. But once you hit that level, and once they know you have the physical capabilities, then it's about all the other stuff, which is far more important. And from a film perspective, there's a lot of dumb teams in the NFL, but I can't believe there's that many dumb teams that Kyle Hamilton's going to fall in the 20s. Well, you go back to last year, same school. I would have said the same thing about the linebacker, Owosu Koromoa, not to Hamilton's degree, but that was supposed to be a top 15 pick, a top 20 at the worst. And all of a sudden he falls in the second round. You say, what the heck is going on here? And he's got a health problem. He's got a heart issue. And that explains it. And oh, by the way, he played and he was the top 15 pick. He was one of the best players in the draft. So we didn't get it wrong. The people that said this kid can play, he can play, but there were some concerns over health issues, and that caused him to drop a little bit. So, we unfortunately we don't get all the information we need. And the most important information tends to be health information, things like that. And that there's usually an explanation for drops, and it's usually not he ran a 4.59. It's usually some kind of health issue, off the field issue, concern, blah blah blah. If you want to go all the way back to Aaron Rodgers and personality, and it's usually something goofy that doesn't relate to the film. And usually there's not multiple teams. There's definitely bad organizations. We're going to start with a bad organization. Number one overall. That is a horrific organization. Doug, if you're listening, Godspeed. Good luck to you. I mean, they're just a disaster in everything they do. So that fuels into the uncertainty. It's a draft that doesn't have a top quarterback. So you can probably justify, if you're Carolina, taking Kenny Pickett or Malik Willis, but you can't do it at number one, and they wouldn't want it because they're back-to-back number ones anyway. But even for somebody who wanted to trade up to the Jacksonville spot, well, you generally want to trade up for a quarterback. You don't want to trade up for an edge rusher that might not even be as good as the second or third edge rusher, depending on which player you like. So it's just there's not a quarterback, and the best players don't play positions the NFL values on draft day, and the ones that do play those positions aren't as good as the recent ones. So if you look at Aiden Hutchinson, for instance, or Kayvon Thibodeau or Trayvon Walker, they're not Myles Garrett. They're not the Bosa twins. They're not even Chase Young from a prospect standpoint.
They've got decisions to make. And I'll just say this for Kyle Hamilton, if he does come down to number 15 and the Eagles are quick enough, smart enough to take him, sometimes information is accurate, evaluations are accurate, and sometimes they're off a little bit. And the Eagles should be happy that 2 decades ago, the rest of the National Football League decided to pass on Brian Dawkins all the way through the first round into the second round, where the Eagles were able to get him. If I remember correctly, same thing. Dawk didn't light up the scoreboard out in Indianapolis, didn't run as fast as some other safeties, and therefore he dropped down, and the Eagles were lucky enough to get him in the second round. Now, Hamilton's not going all the way to the second round, but if he drops down to number 15, I would surely take him. John, you and I have discussed for the last 10 days about who the Eagles are bringing in for their pre-draft visits, and you said, Jody, the individual names are important, but also keep an eye on the positions, that can be as telling as the individuals they're bringing in. They've been active at the wide receiver spot. They brought in or bringing in a safety over the next couple of days, the Penn State kid. So there are positions that they're giving us a peek at that they're at least considering. Which is a bigger need for the Eagles? a second wide receiver behind Devontae Smith or a top. I'm sorry, Anthony Harris, but if they take a safety with the first pick of the draft, that'll be safety one if we had such a thing in the NFL. Which position, in your estimation, is more important for the Eagles to fill, wide receiver?
Well, I'll ask you a question before I answer that, Jody. Do you believe the Eagles? If you believe the Eagles, wide receiver would be the more important position because they need to evaluate the quarterback and they have to build around the quarterback and they have to get the quarterback weapons. I don't believe the Eagles. So, how do you want to go? How do you want to go about this? How do you want to build? How do you want to try to win games?
Let me rephrase the question because you turned it around on me, which you should have. If Howie Roseman called John McMullen this afternoon and said, "Listen, I need a little advice here. We're kind of at a toss-up position between the two. As a matter of fact, if I could show you my draft board, which I won't because you're a dreaded member of the media, we have the exact same grade on Hamilton and Olave. We'll use him as an example because they brought him in yesterday. So it purely comes down to, for us, which of the two guys is a bigger help to the team, year 1, year 3, year 5, year 10. If he was asking for your advice, which way would you tell him to go?
Well, in that scenario, I take Kyle Hamilton, but that's kind of unfair to Chris Olave because I love Kyle. I think Kyle Hamilton's the best football player in the draft. I really do.
Yep.
I think he's the best football player in the draft. So maybe the better would be Dax Hill or Chris Olave. And then I think it's a far more difficult decision for me. And I would probably still lean toward defense because I think this is going to be a running based team again. And not necessarily conventionally as they weren't last year. Their leading rusher last year, I think people forget, had whatever Miles had, 757 yards, whatever the number was. The quarterback's a big part of that rushing attack. So I think they're going to use that unconventional compared to the rest of the league offense again. And if you want to win games that way, you got to make sure the defense is a lot better. And they've made at least incremental improvements with Hassan Reddick and Kaiser White, but they've also taken steps back with no Steve Nelson and Rodney McLeod. Now, they wanted to get better at those positions anyway, but you have to get better. So one of the things everyone says, Jody, when free agency starts in this league, you want to fill as many holes as possible with at least Band-Aids so you don't feel this necessity to reach for a particular position. And I was thinking about this yesterday. When from the start of free agency to now, I think the Eagles have looked like they have more needs than when they started this process. And Howie's right when he says this is a snapshot. We still got the draft. We still got post-draft. Tyrann Mathieu out there. If he comes in all of a sudden after the draft, you're like, oh, that's pretty good at safety. That's an improvement of us. So there's plenty of room to improve, and he's 100% right when he says that. However, if you use that thought process, which he's always said, him and every other GM, well, to this point, you haven't done a good job because you're heading to the draft when we say, what if you want to take the kid from Jordan? What if Jordan Davis is there at 15, but you feel this incredible need to, we got to get a wide receiver. We haven't been able to get Calvin Ridley and Robert Woods and Allen Robinson and Christian Kirk. What if you feel that need to say, there's only one corner left and we don't have the safety net. We can't call Steve Nelson after the draft and say, Steve, come back. What if you feel that and you take a player who isn't as good as a player you could get, but you have more talent at that particular position? I don't think Howie Roseman has set the Eagles up well. T-minus 2 weeks to the draft. I think they're more susceptible Doesn't mean they have to reach, but they're more susceptible to reach now because they haven't filled the holes they've needed to fill with at least safety nets.
You and I agree on that. All right, so let's try and fill one of those holes right here, right now. You and I get the message to Howie. Two of the best free agents left on the market are both secondary players. I'd rank them both in the top 5, as a matter of fact, maybe the top 3. And I'm referring to the Honey Badger and Stephon Gilmore. There was a report out there yesterday that Gilmore is talking to the Rams. Well, there was a report out there that the Honey Badger was talking to the Rams. Does just every good free agent end up at the Rams?
Well, they want to.
Number 1, it's LA. Number 2, they're coming off a championship. I don't think the Rams are getting both, but if they got one out of the 2, so be it. If players are willing to take a little bit less than they could get somewhere else just to go to Hollywood, there's nothing you can do about that. Some people consider Hollywood to be more of a destination than Philadelphia. I don't, but I don't matter. I'm already here. Let's say the Rams are going to get one of the 2, which that means the other one is not going to Hollywood, going somewhere else, one of the other 31 teams, and maybe the Eagles could jump in if they had the desire and the money to be able to put a pretty good deal on the table. If they could be the aggressor rather than the Rams offers are out there for both players, and they're both sitting on them. They'd like to get more, but they're not getting more from LA. Which one would be the better fit for the Eagles? Just average market deal, not above and beyond, not paying a tax, but also not getting them cheap. What John McMullen would consider a fair market deal, both 1 years for either of those players. Which one do you think is a better fit with the Eagles?
I think Tyrann. It's probably not even close, the Honey Badger, because that's the type of player Jonathan Gannon wants. And, the versatile safety that can move around and play a bunch of different positions. And they play a lot of cover 2 anyway. Now, I presume if they get a better corner opposite Darius Slay, he might be able to do some different things. But either way, he's going to be a heavy zone guy. So I don't think I think you can cobble it through. I think last year's a perfect example. I mean, Steve Nelson did a fine job as a compliment. And, part of the reason is he's not out there on an island a ton where maybe he could get exposed with a lack of speed. So I think you could mask more issues at corner than you can at safety in his particular defense, what he wants to do. So I don't think that's close. But I think the Eagles are waiting, and they're playing this waiting game. Like, they want to see what they get in the draft. And, all right, maybe it all works out. But if it doesn't, and all of a sudden, like you said, the Rams, the Colts seem to be zeroing in on Stephon Gilmore, and a bunch of indie reporters were, buzzing yesterday saying they want to get something done. Indianapolis is serious with Stephon Gilmore. So all of a sudden, if they get him, and then you have Matthew, who, part of this might be his agent. Let's be honest. I mean, I haven't heard much from the Rams side. I've heard more from the Matthew side. Same with the Saints. I mean, he wants to play in New Orleans. I don't think there's a ton of interest. So he might fall into the Eagles' lap. And, they might be playing this right. But it is a gamble. It is a gamble when you do that and you wait and you wait to see what you get in the draft.
And or the gamble being you might get the player, but you might get him on a bad deal. That they sniffed the desperation because you didn't fill that void you were looking to fill in the draft. So they're in a better position, and you have to acknowledge, hey, we got to do something. We can't just go back out there with what we have as of right now. So you end up paying the guy a little bit more. We don't know how it's going to shake out. Here's what we do know. 13 days from now, some questions will be answered. They'll be further answered when they get out there on the field. More important answer when they get out there on the field, but at least on paper, we'll know the guys will be in green come August when they get down to the training center for the Birds. All right, we got 2 good guests coming your way. Hour number 2, it's going to be our bud. The other half.
Ed just popped on. Ed, you're at 9:20 today.
Oh, I thought that was our first guest.
Isn't Ed at 9:20? Vinny's at 8:20, or am I screwing this up?
No,
I don't want.
you got it right. Eddie's just up and at him early. We usually
Yeah,
punch him up at 8:20.
yeah, he's used to it. That's my fault. I should have emphasized 9:20.
Okay.
Hopefully, Ed Kratz can still be here at 9:20.
Well, here's what you do. Ed,
He gave me a thumbs up.
What's he gonna do? Go out and walk the dog too, like you and I? So we just tell him to hang out in case Vinny bags. Because our two scheduled guests were Vinny Serrato, former general manager of the Washington football team, used to be the Redskins, now the Commanders. Call them whatever the hell you want. The Nation Capitals football squad, their former general manager turned talk show host in Baltimore, Vinny Serrato, scheduled to join us, as is the other half of the Eagles maven on Sports Illustrated, Ed Kratz. Here's a teaser if there ever was one. We're going to take a quickie timeout. Then you're going to come back and find out who's joining the show. Will it be Vinny Serrato or will it be Ed Kratz? Stick around and find out.